Hello, everyone. This is Art Cafe, episode 128. Please welcome my next guest, Tim Zarki. Tim is a 3D artist at Oculus with a degree of industrial design. I first came across Tim's work years ago, and it is a long overdue appearance on the podcast. Sit back, and I hope you'll enjoy this one. Let's go.
And so to go from that to, giant company with like 60,000 employees that has its own like transportation network and like infrastructure and is like, I think there's, so like the city where Facebook, so I work for Facebook technically, and
Right.
the city of Menlo Park, which is where Facebook is located, I think Facebook's employees are now like higher than the population of the city. And so like it's almost like Facebook is a city unto itself in a way. And so they have a lot of like back and forth with the city governments about things all the time.
So how much truth is in the Silicon Valley show in terms of how the city feels?
I can't even watch it because it's too close to being accurate. It's like it's uncomfortable to like watch the show because it's too real. Like the comedy is great. It's like super well written, but it's like too
I love that show.
Uncanny Valley. Yeah.
I have a better question actually. How do you think the city is going to change after COVID-19?
I think a lot of people are going to leave. Well, at least I'm hearing that a lot of people are leaving right now just because, it's like there's a lot of different factors, obviously,
of
that
course.
play into this. Like some of it is, small businesses closing, so people don't have jobs, and so they're leaving for that reason. Some of it is like the big tech companies are saying, hey, like we're just going to let people be remote from now on, and you can live wherever you want to, and we'll negotiate that with you. So like a lot of people who lived here for that, to work at these companies, now they have other options and don't, can essentially move wherever they want to and keep their job. And so I think there's a lot of people who are like, well, if I can live wherever I want, I'm not going to tolerate paying how much it costs to live in San Francisco or anywhere else in Silicon Valley. So I think a lot of people are leaving for that reason. But I don't know. I feel like there will always be like more people to come take their place. So
yeah.
I think like rent prices in San Francisco are down like 9% right now, but I don't know if that will continue to go down or if it's going to bounce back up. And it's really hard for me to say.
Rent in LA did not drop. It dropped
Really?
for like a few weeks and then rocketed back on. So I think the assumption is that everything's going to be like back to normal, but I don't know.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
I talk with some of the friends that live here as well, and they're like strongly considering like why am I here? It's like I don't have to work. Like now I can work from home. I don't have to go to the office. I mean, there are some studios that will require people to go back. Obviously, that's going to be the expectation.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of people realize that like it's inefficient. Like it's so much better to just be at home and focus on your own.
That's what you're used to, right? Is that kind of how you work
most
normally?
of the time? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've done one project recently that I did commute to, and it was definitely worth, but honestly, I prefer working from home. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just like the way I like to work specifically, just being, a little bit more recluse. I've been saying that I'm more of an introvert. I think that's true.
I definitely am for sure. So I can relate to that.
So like being in crowds bothers me a lot. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't like being in crowds. I don't like being in crowded spaces.
Same.
Unless it's like concerts. Even though on concerts, like if it's like super narrow, I don't feel comfortable. If there's enough space to move around, that's okay. But then with concerts, you're like, and I used to go to some, you're usually focused on like a specific show, and then you get out and that's it, so it's like a little different. But yeah, working from home, I don't know, like I've been saying that I was listening to that book, Remote. It's written by the people who created not Bandcamp, Basecamp.
Oh yeah, I've heard about this. I haven't read it.
Yeah, and I was listening to it on Ubers when I was Uber, because like I was working. I wasn't even full-time working, like full-time traveling to work.
Yeah.
I was like three days a week, so that was manageable, But like each time on the way, I was like, oh fuck. It's like listening to it, like I agree.
That's so funny.
And meanwhile, traffic and just being exhausted,
Yeah, it's really interesting because like Facebook before the pandemic had a very strong stance on wanting everyone to be in one of their office spaces for, promoting collaboration or, whatever else, resources, facilities, whatever. So like there were almost no employees that worked for the company that were like truly remote employees. Like I know of like one who's like kind of an exception, who's on the industrial design team, but they've did a complete 180, and now they're like, we're going to focus on hiring remote employees,
right?
And make that like a big thing that we're going to just dedicate resources to. And so, and I think they're going to reevaluate once this all sort of, who knows, things will go back to normal. But once things progress to a point, I think they're going to sort of reevaluate their policies on all of their normal, I guess, workers as well. Maybe that means like having the flexibility to spend like 50% of your time in the office and 50% of your time at home or whatever else. And they've always been pretty flexible about like, if you need to work from home one day, like you can basically do that, no questions asked. But there's always the expectation that if you can, you should be in the office.
Right.
And I think that expectation is going to be changing a lot. So I'm curious to see what happens with that.
Yeah, I was talking to John Gaeta on the podcast recently, and he mentioned that about Silicon Valley specifically. Like those big studios are realizing that a lot of the workforce that they had on staff, on site, they're as productive, if not more, working from home. Which means like, why am I having this 100,000 square feet, real estate in the middle of one of the most expensive cities?
Right. Well, I don't think that they necessarily predicted that until they had actual data to show.
Yeah, of course.
Like once it was necessary for everyone to do that, then they could actually look and see like, oh, all of our data shows that like people are as productive as they were before. If not, I think, Facebook tracks a lot of stuff based on software engineering and like how much sort of new code is being produced and, put out there and delivered basically. And apparently we're doing better than we were before the pandemic with everyone at home. So by those metrics, at least.
Yeah.
I don't know how you
it's a double-edged sword though, right? Don't you? If those studios will not have the office spaces, then all the support staff, like supporting staff, is out of work.
Well, and not only that, but also like just as someone that works from home, it is really difficult to like what do you do if you have an IT problem that you can't solve yourself? Because with a company like Facebook, we have a lot of like, specific hardware that we're supposed to use, VPNs, software, et cetera. And all of that all those systems have been built with the assumption that like, if you have a problem, you can just go to an IT desk and they'll help you fix it. Yeah. So they're having a lot of problems right now with just figuring out how to help people and support people when we're not able to go to that desk and like have that in-person interaction with someone who knows.
Maybe they're going to start hiring like remote IT, like 24-hour delivery.
But a good example of this
like an IT Uber for IT.
Yeah. But like my team just hired someone. We hired her a long time ago, but she's just now starting. And so like she has done her entire onboarding process remotely, and also like getting all of her like hardware and software set up remotely. And Facebook is basically saying like, we can't, because like my team is trying to get like custom PCs so that we're all using the same hardware, and it's all like, you know, custom built GPU rendering machines that are really nice. And we have the budget for it, and we have the specs and like the company that's going to build them for us all lined up, and no one, like the company isn't willing to deliver the PCs to us, like where we live.
Just
so
sign a waiver. Like, what the fuck?
I know. It's like, but they just don't have a system to like deal with this in their massive hierarchy of
just post office
IT processes,
USPS,
right? Like, yeah, it's such a silly problem, because it's like, well, just put it on a FedEx truck and send it to me. But yeah, so they don't really have a process in place for handling that yet. Because the problem is like, some company builds the machine and then they send it to Facebook, and Facebook has to do their own like process to it afterwards to like get the, you know, operating system and all the software set up the way that they do things. And that has to be done by somebody in person. And so the computer has to go from the company that built it to that person, and then finally to us, who are actually the end users of it. And I guess they just don't have that like process figured out remotely right now. So
yeah, big companies struggle because like they have to, it's not like that, like everything has to be done through legal departments, I'm pretty sure.
Right. But like meanwhile, we're all using our personal PCs because we don't have access to like company hardware that can do what we need it to do. So it's kind of like,
that's the entire industry right now. That's why VPNs are skyrocketing.
Yeah, I can imagine. So
yeah, but that's interesting. You've joined the Oculus team, right? When was that?
Yes. 2 years ago. Actually, almost exactly 2 years ago.
Wow. Okay. Time's
my
flying.
Anniversary was at the end of May. Yeah.
You know, it feels like yesterday because we were talking about Learn Squared, I think, last time we spoke. I mean, we've been going back and forth every now and then, but yeah, I remember you were like, yeah, I'm just about to start this new adventure, and it feels like it was yesterday, dude.
Yeah, I think when my Learn Squared class came out, it was like right around the time that I was starting this new job. Like right before, I think. So it's 2 years.
God, time's flying, man. Super crazy. You were working on where were you working before? I don't even remember anymore. But you, as you said, it was like smaller projects, usually like client projects mostly, right?
Yeah, so I worked for a company called Minimal. That's they're basically like an industrial design agency that they specialize. Well, they don't. I would say they specialize in consumer electronics, but they work with all different kinds of clients, from like furniture, consumer electronics, medical devices, even some like footwear and sort of like sporting equipment type stuff. So kind of a pretty broad range of products.
Right.
And they basically brought me in straight out of school, right out of college. And I was an intern there when I was a senior in college, and then started working there full time after I graduated. And it was I think it was probably like the best job I could have had right out of school, because the team there was all just like incredibly talented people. It felt like a family. You felt like you're best friends with all your coworkers basically, and kind of there to have fun as well as, you know, do really good work, which is a great environment to be in. And then I basically sort of progressed through that company from like being a junior designer when I was first hired to being kind of like a visualization expert. So someone that basically is responsible for helping clients do, you know, high-end like final renders of all of the work that we would do for them, or even do like some motion design stuff. So basically if we finish designing a product for a client, they would come to us afterwards and say like, hey, it would be awesome if you could design or like create an animation of this for us to either, I mean, I think most of it was like internal. So like, it wasn't like an animation that was going to be used to like advertise the product or something like that publicly. It was more just like something that they could use to like sell this project internally within the company or something like that.
Like with the investors and whatnot, just showing like a use case. Hey, this is how it's going to look like.
Exactly.
You know, when it's done. So you get an idea instead of like a drawing that, you know, might not necessarily be in the presentable way for people that normally don't have imagination.
Exactly. So I kind of got to be sort of the point person for doing that type of stuff within the company. They had other people that had done that type of work for them in the past, but those people had all kind of moved on around the time that I started. So there was kind of no one else to fill that void as far as skills are concerned. So I kind of got to be that person, and it was great because like I kind of knew that I wanted to get better at that type of work. Like, I studied industrial design, but like I was really inspired by just 3D art and motion design and stuff like that. And I kind of knew that I wanted to be more than just an industrial designer at that point.
Right.
So it kind of gave me an opportunity to just spend a lot of time learning those skills and doing it for actual clients, which put a lot of pressure on me, but also like forced me to just figure it out and, spend a lot of time messing around in the software, doing tutorials, et cetera, to get to a point where I could be a little bit more confident and, being able to actually do it. And then eventually that led to like me transitioning into a slightly different role within the company, which was more of like a specialist that was like, it was actually in my title basically as like being a person that focuses on the 3D and the visualization side of things. So I would still do industrial design projects and occasionally even lead them. But whenever the company had like a specific need for that type of work, I would be kind of the go-to person for that. So
gotcha.
I was like learning Cinema and Redshift and Octane, and trying to convince the company to get like, GPU rendering PCs and stuff for me to use so we could do really nice renders and so forth. And actually taught some of my coworkers how to use Cinema a little bit so that they could also help me out with some of that type of stuff.
Right.
And then I think like when I left that to come to Oculus, it was kind of it represented sort of a breaking point in my career where I was like, okay, I'm going to stop being an industrial designer full time and like a visualization person sort of part of the time, and move from being like a fully like dedicated 3D artist basically, and then do industrial design on the side instead of as my like, main job.
Reverse switch.
Exactly. So that's kind of what I've been doing for the past couple of years.
Did you study industrial design, right?
Yeah. So I went to school for industrial design in like a 5-year program at the University of Cincinnati. And the thing that was really awesome about that program is that they basically require you to do a lot of internships. And so I did like 4 internships before I graduated, which is not normal. Like especially within the industrial design world, like you might do 1, like maybe 2 if you're really ambitious, in most other programs. And so 4 is like kind of insane. And so you graduate school.
4 is when you're awesome.
Yeah, like you graduate school and you have like all of this experience already, which makes it so much easier to find work because you can show actual professional projects that you've done in your portfolio to other companies and be like, hey, like hire me. I can prove to you that I can do this already, even though I just graduated school because I have all these experiences. So that was really valuable. That was part of, so I actually lived in San Francisco for the first time on one of those internships.
Got it.
For a company here that is called Huge Design, and kind of knew after that experience that I wanted to come back here after I graduated if I could. And it just worked out really nicely that at the time Minimal was opening a small office here in San Francisco. And I was just like, hey, I would love to move to San Francisco if you're looking for help. And so it kind of lined up really perfectly and they were able to bring me out here.
Right. So you've been up there for a while.
Yeah, I've lived in San Francisco since like spring of 2015. So it's been about 5 years now.
5 years.
Or 6, 5, something like that. Yeah. 5.
5. Yeah, 5. I was in San Francisco once in my life. That was in 2011, I think. End of 2011. Yeah. A long time ago. I've heard the city changed a lot since then.
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak to what it's been like in the past 5 years,
for
but
sure.
I've heard the same from people who've lived here for a long time.
Yeah, I remember really liking it. And then 2016 is when, some of the friends that I have that been living there telling me like, oh, it's just gone too crazy.
Yeah.
Too busy, too expensive, too crazy. But yeah, interesting. I do have a follow-up thing for this, because like for me it's fascinating when like how people get to learn the craft that they are in, right? Because I've learned everything by myself. Basically, I had to sort of like rely on what's available on the internet, which was almost nothing. So it was like a trial and error, and just getting inspired by, hey, oh my god, this guy is such an amazing artist, I want to do something like that. And you would like work and post your work on forums, and hopefully every now and then you would get a comment from someone who's reputable that would give you a point you, okay, maybe you should do this, maybe you should do that, you know. And so back when I was learning, going to an actual art school, like proper art school or design school, was the way to go, because you had instructors that were working in the industry, and you could reliably learn what kind of skill sets that they have, what kind of workflows they use for the work that they do. And mind you, everything was like on much slower pace back then, you know. 2004, 2005, it's like you didn't have social media, you didn't like Facebook didn't exist back then. So the only way to learn, I think the only places were like Gnomon DVDs, literally that. If I don't know if there was anything else. And then, you know, like all the major universities that offered, you know, like good programs. So I wonder how you think, I mean, obviously when you were learning, it probably were already different than it is now. Do you think like, because with the art industry, you know, you still have Art Center, you still like, you have Gnomon School, you have some major universities that are considered to be good for design, but I think the consensus is that you don't need to go that route anymore. Like there's so much material out there. It's more difficult to find the right material to learn from, but you can save yourself a lifelong depth
Yes.
to learn those skills. I wonder how it is with the industrial design, because it feels like it's a little bit of a different, you know, a little bit different subject. Obviously, there's your class in Learn Squared. You can take that and learn everything you need.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have like perspective on both sides of this, because obviously I went to, you know, university to study industrial design, and I don't think that I would have been able to work in that field had I not done that.
Right.
But I also am pretty much entirely self-taught in all of the other things that I now do for my full-time job. So it's like, you know, I can see both sides. And so I think industrial design is particularly difficult. I don't think it's quite at the point yet where I can confidently say like, you don't need to go get a 4-year degree to do this, because I just don't think it has the same, isn't it the quantity and quality of educational content online for industrial design? I just don't think it exists yet. And I think that part of the experience of studying industrial design is like it's really hands-on. So like you need tools and you need to be able to like actually make physical things, which not everyone has access to on their own. I mean, there's like maker spaces and stuff like that now, which I think are helping to like fill that gap a little bit, but it's still different than like having a, you know, being in a classroom environment where you have a dedicated shop that you can go to with 3D printers and, you know, all the woodworking tools you might need to make models and everything else. Having that is really valuable, because I think like, I mean, I'm a huge proponent of like digital tools for industrial design and like doing a lot of work in 3D, but I think there's a lot of people that need that like hands-on experience to understand form and understand how things are made and feel it for themselves. I think there's a huge amount to learn from that you really don't get if you're kind of just in your bedroom doing stuff on the internet. And then I think the other part of it that is possible to replicate online, but just maybe it doesn't exist yet, is like the environment of like having a peer group with actual like critique.
Right.
Because I think that was another really invaluable part of going to school is, having a professor that, basically forces you to get up and present your work in front of a group of your peers and defend it and explain why you did it the way you did it, and be open to feedback and be open to having to change things and sort of juggle. I mean, it's kind of like the experience of having to work with the clients in the professional, once you actually graduate and start working professionally. So, I think that it's really difficult to replicate that as well online, and it's possible. I think, Learn Squared is great because it has a really, vibrant community of people that are, constantly posting their work and commenting on it. And I think that's really valuable, but I don't think it quite replaces that sort of client relationship that you get when you have kind of like a design critique.
Yeah, it's different for sure. Like online experience is not going to replace in-person experience, especially on the subject of design. You know, it's not like you can kid bash your way out.
That's the thing. Like, you have to
design.
pick up. It was really interesting in my program that I went to because they didn't require a portfolio. So anybody could attend as long as you had good grades in high school, basically. Mm-hmm. And that meant that people came into the program with all different levels of experience and all different backgrounds. And so it was really interesting to see in that environment, how some people were able to grow so quickly and pick up skills that they didn't have before, that even just drawing, for example, there were people who came in that had really not ever drawn before. And industrial design, a huge part of it is, especially when you're learning as a student, is drawing. And so to see those people go from zero to being pretty competent over the span of a year is really awesome. And that was one of the things that I really loved about being in that environment, is because, you could help, if someone had more experience, they could help people, who are kind of at a lesser experience level. And I think having that really hands-on instruction was super valuable as well. So I think that was another thing that I really enjoyed about that experience, is just kind of seeing people from all these different backgrounds kind of come at it from different angles. And everybody, by the end of that first year, either you dropped out or you got really good, basically, or at least pretty good, regardless of where you started. So I thought that was really awesome to see. And I would not trade that experience, I think, for anything. And I know that I owe my career basically to the opportunities that I got from the internships that I had during that program. For sure. The reason why Minimal hired me in the first place is because a letter of recommendation from one of my previous jobs, two of the guys knew each other really closely from college, and one of them sent a recommendation letter on my behalf to the other one, and that's kind of what's encouraged them to interview me for that job. So I think in the industrial design world, a lot of that kind of networking and relationship building is super important too. And I just don't know how I would have ever managed any of that if I was just doing stuff online. But like I said, on the flip side, everything that I'm doing now full time as a 3D artist is stuff that I learned on my own, basically using online resources. So I think I'm blown away every day by the amount of educational content that's really, really high quality educational content that's either free or very affordable for what you're getting online. Yeah. And I think it's just amazing and makes me super excited to want to learn new things all the time.
Imagine if you had to take $200,000 loan to learn everything you've learned after the industrial design. It'll be right? What the fuck?
It just would not have happened, right? So I think it's, and I'm really curious to see also how the pandemic kind of changes education, or maybe forces it to change in certain ways, because the people who are in these traditional university settings are no longer getting what they paid for in a lot of cases.
Pretty much.
All of those awesome things that I talked about are being handicapped in a lot of ways now. And so I think I have no idea what's going to happen with that, but my hope is that it spurs the generation of a lot of additional online resources, maybe in industrial design as well, to help people who are, trying to learn on their own, or, have, are in one of these programs, but don't feel like they're getting what they need out of it. So I don't know what's going to happen with that, but
I really hope that too. I feel like this whole situation is putting the entire university in the industry on notice.
Yeah, for sure.
It's
I think
like
people are starting to realize, like, oh, I'm paying all of this money, and where is that money really going? And like, what am I really getting from it? Especially if I'm sitting in my bedroom, like with my webcam turned on a Zoom call.
Yeah.
So
if like 10, like if someone came in and said today, hey, like most of the university is gonna go bankrupt in the next 10 years, like I would say, yeah, quite possible. Who knows? I don't wish ill to any of it, but man, like the amount of debt you're incurring just to get education that you can find and for a fraction of the cost is kind of insane. Yeah, I was curious, like, because seems like entertainment industry specifically has it more readily available in terms of like what you can learn and where and how.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder though if any of that is actually affecting also how much benefits you're getting from that industry as well. Meaning, okay, it's pretty easy to learn in entertainment design, or it's getting easier to learn entertainment design.
Yeah.
Meaning the barrier of entry is pretty low, which also means there is more competition, which also means the prices go down usually. And when you don't have that competition and you need like someone who's like highly skilled, then it might be a little bit different. I feel like, although at this point of time, I think like things like industrial design and entertainment design, they cross pollinate so much already.
Yeah, they're definitely starting to in a big way. I'm noticing,
since like as you said, like industrial design going digital, which opens up, okay, like I don't have to be good at crafting anymore. Like,
right.
Yeah.
Like I was never good at making models in school. I always dreaded it whenever I had to. I think I decided pretty quickly that like, I'm just going to focus on getting better at 3D modeling and rendering because that's what I'm actually good at,
right.
And what I enjoy the most. But you're right. Like I see a lot of people who are kind of like on both sides starting to like cross over. So like people that are, trained in concept art are starting to do some industrial design work. People who are in the industrial design world are wanting to do concept art and vice versa. So I do see a lot of cross-pollination there, and I enjoy seeing that because, I mean, it's something that I've always wanted to do as well. Just personally, I didn't really get into industrial design with the goal of designing, or I shouldn't say that. Like I think I've talked about this in the past, but it's like my background was always being way more interested in kind of like art and science fiction and film and video games. And I actually contemplated the idea of being a concept artist or going into concept art when I was in high school, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my career. And, I took a tour of Art Center and was just super intimidated by the whole thing and felt like I didn't have I guess I didn't have any like reassurance that I was going to be capable of doing that and succeeding at it. And the entire idea of it just felt super intimidating to me. And so I went into industrial design instead because I felt like, especially with the program that I got accepted into at the University of Cincinnati, like without the portfolio requirement, I felt like, this is kind of a sure thing. Like, I know that I can do this. I know I'm going to learn a lot about 3D and rendering and making things, and I'm going to get to draw a lot, which I like to do. So it felt like a very safe thing for me to do. But the thing that I didn't think too deeply about is like, do I actually want to design products for the rest of my career? Like, is that something I'm passionate about? And the answer is kind of no. Like, I realized that in my senior year of school. Like, I think from the beginning of the program to like the fourth year, I was just super engaged in how much I was learning. And so I didn't really care, like, I didn't think too deeply about like why like what is it about products that I'm actually passionate about designing, because I was just learning so much, like I didn't really care. But then by my senior year, when I was doing my like final thesis project, I was starting to think about like, what do I actually want to do with my career after I'm done with this? And already was starting to realize that, you know, I'm way more interested in 3D and just making 3D art and that type of thing. I found, I mean, that was around the time when I was starting to discover people like you and people like Ash and Beeple and Gmonk, and kind of getting exposure to all of these incredibly talented artists that you can find through the power of the internet. And I had never been exposed to any of your work before. And so it really made me question, like, you know, do I really want to be doing like designing consumer electronics, you know, like boxes with LEDs on them, and you know, just like I don't know. I think like I had a lot of peers who like genuinely wanted to design products and like felt really passionate about how that can affect people's lives. And there's a lot of valid, I think valid things to wanting to pursue that for sure. I just didn't feel like it aligned perfectly with what I wanted to do. And so as soon as I graduated and started working at Minimal, I like realized like, oh, I'm going to spend a lot of my free time like learning all this other stuff that I'm way more passionate about doing. And so that's when I started to, well, I guess I've always been kind of into Blender. So like I was using Blender back in high school to do just like
Which year was that? 2000.
Oh, this would have been like 2006 to 2010. I think I started learning Blender in like 2004 or 2005, like when I was like 12, basically.
That's when Blender was a laughing stock.
Oh yeah, it was bad. But it was the only thing that I had, and so
right. I remember when I was at Crytek back then, and someone brought up like, look, there is this free software, Blender, and people were just like,
right, like it was kind of the silly 3D program that nobody took seriously because it was open source and the UI was really bad and all these things. But for me, like as a, you know, junior high student, like just trying to figure out 3D for the first time, like it was awesome. And I mean, it was really hard. Like I gave up a lot, probably like 2 or 3 times before it actually stuck. But I'm really glad that I did that because it gave me like an understanding of 3D going into college that not that many of my peers had at the time. And so it made a lot of things make a lot more sense to me than I think, you know, I had a lot of friends that really struggled with 3D modeling at first. And I never really had, I kind of just had this like experience to draw from that I could sort of relate back to, even though like CAD modeling for industrial design is a lot different than, you know, the type of modeling that you would do for any kind of like concept art or entertainment stuff. Although now they're starting to become the same again because people are doing a lot of CAD stuff in concept art now with like Fusion 360 and Moy, which is cool to see. But anyway, I don't know where I'm going with this story other than to say that, you know, I kind of had this sort of background back in high school where like concept art was something that was in the back of my head. I was drawing lots of like spaceships and robots and stuff like that in my free time, and 3D modeling airplanes and all this stuff, and kind of abandoned it a little bit when I went to college because I just was focused on the career side of things and wanting to get a job and build all the skills that I needed to do that. And then once I got there, I realized like, oh, I actually still care about all those things. And like, I want to go back and focus a lot of my energy on that again.
Right.
And so it's really cool now for me as a professional to have people that I can relate to that are doing both, like people who are doing industrial design and concept stuff, or people that come from the concept art world who are interested in ID. It's just exciting, I think, for me. And it makes me feel like I could do both as well if I want to.
Yeah, now we're in 2020 and Blender is becoming almost an industry standard.
People are all about it now, which is awesome too.
Yeah. I picked it up recently too. I was trying to give it a try when 2.8, I think it was beta, came out last year.
Yep.
Early on. And then the actual 2.8 came out. I was learning it a little bit. And they made a lot of strides. Like even from there to now, the changes were significant. The only thing that is kind of bumming me out is that it doesn't seem like there's any or not enough or any progress in terms of like adaptation of Blender towards Mac OS specifically.
Yeah.
Because I'm waiting for a day where I can just drop using Windows.
I'm 100% PC now, so
I know.
I'm not aware of how well Blender works on a Mac at this point.
It just doesn't. It's just riddled with bugs. That's at least. I mean, I was trying it on my laptop, and it was just not good. I had some friends trying that. They were like, "Oh man, it's crashing, corrupting files. It's not good." Yeah, the only reason I'm talking about this is because like, man, Windows sometimes drives me up the wall.
I mean, I'm right there with you. I just grit my teeth and accept it at this point.
There's a lot of performance based, like there's, I would gladly make a trade-off in price and performance if the result of it would be more stability and less troubleshooting.
Yep.
Because I think you reach a point eventually where those latter aspects matter the most on any project you're on. You know,
absolutely.
If you're 2% faster, that quickly gets negated if something doesn't work or something crashes, or Windows releases like a stupid update and force feeds you, and then nothing works all of a sudden. You know.
I had that happen before, and it's the most painful thing ever. I've had to like roll back certain updates as well because they just break my entire machine. Thankfully, they let you do that now, which is nice, but it's still like such an annoying thing to have to do, especially if you're in the middle of a project and have deadlines.
The most annoying was those forced updates that they allow you to postpone couple of times, but like after a few times you post it just automatically goes to a counter, and it's like 15 minutes. So you render like a big project animation or something, and then this fucking things comes out. It's like, the fuck, you know?
From like from a design standpoint, that's like such a anti it's like a decision that Microsoft made that in my mind is just very like against the user. Like it's not designed with your happiness and satisfaction in mind. No. So yeah, it's stuff like that bothers me a lot. But I think it was painful for me because I grew up using Macs, and like my dad from as long as I can remember has had, you know, Mac computers. It's what I like learned 3D on for the first time. It's what I learned Photoshop on. And I think part of what allowed me to accept doing everything on the PC was just, I think for industrial design, it's also kind of a necessity because a lot of the CAD packages that are used kind of most commonly in the industry just don't have Mac versions. Yeah. There's one called SolidWorks, which is like one of the most common CAD programs in ID. And there just isn't Mac versions. So like I think everybody, it's so funny. Like most of my classmates in school had MacBook Pros, and just about everybody like did boot camp on them and then spent their entire time using Windows basically to do all of their 3D modeling and rendering and stuff. Just because like you had to. So like that was my experience in school. And so when I, you know, got out of school and was thinking about building my own PC, I was just like, you know what, I'm just going to do it and learn to deal with it because I have to use Windows for work anyway. So I might as well just adopt it and make the best of it. But I share all of those frustrations though, for sure.
I guess Fusion 360 is a good alternative.
It is, which it didn't exist
back then.
Yeah, it's true. But I mean, like even now though, like if you go work for a certain company and they're like all of their designers are using SolidWorks, like they're going to want you to use SolidWorks as well.
Yeah, of course.
But I think if you're doing your own stuff, obviously, it's a good option.
To me, the biggest offender was the Windows sync change. That was, what the fuck you guys are doing?
Wait, what was this again?
Windows Inc. change.
Oh, wait.
That was like 2 years ago or 3 years ago. They released an update that eventually everyone had to update to because like a lot of graphic cards required the new update. So you had to kind of roll into it. And it basically completely changed the Windows Inc. behavior, making it absolutely impossible. Like you have to disable it, and like I have it disabled in Windows because it just makes the programs unusable. Yeah.
Like using a tablet and like having, anytime you press, like a little thing comes up. It's like, hey, did you want to use Windows Ink or whatever? Like it just completely ruined that experience.
Then like the amount of lag. Fuck.
Yeah.
I wish. I mean, Mac OS. I mean, you've been using it a lot. You know how streamlined it is. It's
it's pretty to look at. It works great. Like
you're gonna have a lot of nerds coming out like, yeah, but you can do this and that on PCs. Like, I get it. I understand that, but like that's if you're like more of a generalist of using PC for doing quirky stuff, then absolutely that's I guess that's fun. But if you're working on a project and you don't want to deal with like updating 20 drivers from different websites and companies and then finding which driver is compatible with which, and if it's not, it's gonna blue screen and corrupt your files, and you're in the middle of like an important project and all of it is triggered because you forgot to disable automatic updates. It's like, or you wanted to try a new software and turns out the new software requires a updated graphics settings, and then that graphics settings update requires you to update Windows and like it all breaks. Yeah,
I've been there. Yeah,
it's frustrating.
Yeah, it's sad that there is no like alternative. I mean, no. And Apple is, I think, just making a lot of decisions that don't benefit 3D artists, people that need to be able to use certain tools, people that are doing GPU rendering. Like there just isn't a good option for a lot of people. So it sucks.
It's great for editing. If you want to do like editing, it's probably the best solution you will ever find at like editing wise, speeds, everything,
It's great for music production. It's great for like pretty much every like creative discipline except like doing lots of 3D work.
That's true.
Which sucks.
That's true.
So, yeah, it's a bummer.
Yeah. What made you go to work with Oculus apart from like, oh, it's Oculus, it's awesome?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was just ready for a change. It represented an opportunity for me to sort of shed the title of being like a full-time industrial designer and start to think of myself as like a 3D generalist, which, is not necessarily a good reason to take a new job, but for me, it was like a nice sort of mental shift in perspective.
Right.
But I was really excited about the company just because there were so many talented artists that have come to Oculus from various backgrounds. Like, I think there's a lot of people who started their careers in like the film industry, like doing, concept art for movies and entertainment or video games, or people that, are from more of the technical programming side in like the video game industry or the VFX world, who all just got burned out by those jobs and were looking for something else where they could use their skills. And they all, wound up at places like Oculus because, Oculus needs people with all of those, backgrounds, but the work is a lot different. And I think it's just a different environment to be in at a tech company where I would say the work-life balance is generally a lot better. It's terrible for me right now personally, but in general, I think it's better than a lot of those companies, and you get paid really well for your work. There's a lot of resources that you have access to and budget to do things. And so I get to, be exposed to all these, incredibly talented people who have got experience from, careers that I never got to, I have no idea what it's like to work in, the film industry or video games or anything like that, just because I've never done it myself. So it's awesome to be able to learn from those people. And also, it represented kind of an opportunity for me to start a team to a certain degree as well. I didn't really know that this was going to happen, but when I was hired, I was basically like the only person at the company who was like a dedicated product visualization person. So like I was hired under the assumption that I would be sort of the go-to person for like any kind of like 3D sort of product imagery, whether that's like on our website or like packaging or, advertising or whatever. And granted, like it's a huge company with a lot of like needs for different things. So we work with a lot of agencies to do a lot of our sort of bigger like advertising pieces and things like that. So we're constantly, working with different companies for some of those larger scale projects. But
Sure.
I get to like work directly with our industrial design team and our marketing team to sort of set the tone for everything and like help create all of the sort of like core, I guess, imagery of our products that then is used as like a point of reference by like all the agencies that are working for us. And so when I started, I was the only person doing that for the company, and was super overwhelmed because like it's a big company and we need a lot of stuff. And then
we need it for yesterday.
yeah. And then 2 years later, I'm on a team of 4 that I helped hire. And awesome. I'm working with some incredibly talented people who I really admire. So we're able to do a lot more now. And we're also, I think everybody who is on the team has like really different backgrounds and different skill sets. Right. And we're all like pretty ambitious with what we would like to do. And so we're kind of like working within the company to help sort of move the ball forward with like the art direction, like how we present our products, like I guess just like the overall like look and feel of the brand even. And to a certain extent, we don't really have control over those things because at the end of the day, a lot of those decisions get made by the marketing team and things like that. But we're the only people that are providing a lot of the imagery for the products. And so we do have a lot of like influence over, what those things end up looking like, which is cool. So it's been a very different experience. Like I think when I was in school, I had one job where I worked as an intern at kind of a larger company like this. But it was a toy company. So it was like a completely different, different sort of experience. So this is really like my, first time working within like such a large company like this with so many different teams that are working on a really diverse range of projects. And it's awesome to just have exposure to people who are really like some of the best, most knowledgeable people in their respective fields, working on new technology and really exciting stuff. So I feel like my piece is like this big, and it's so awesome to just be surrounded by, all the other cool things that are happening. So
yeah, that must be like interesting experience, like refreshing experience, because I feel like based on what you said so far, moving to Oculus was not only just like a new experience, but also much closer to what you originally were most excited to do.
Yeah, maybe. I'm still the kind of person that like has a million side projects all the time. I'm
like
trying
we all.
Trying to explore things and just make art for the sake of making art, which is, I think, the most important thing. But like it definitely has given me an opportunity to really focus on building a lot of these skills that like, it was one thing to do like 3D renders for products at Minimal because I was the only person there really who was doing it. And at the end of the day, like I was learning everything myself, and I could be really scrappy about the way that I did things because no one was going to care as long as the end result was cool looking, cool looking images. But now that I'm on like a team, we're having to like actually develop really good workflows for things and, figure out ways to collaborate with each other effectively and kind of be efficient in the way that we work. And also just being exposed to people that are more knowledgeable about the software in a lot of cases than I am. Like I'm able to pick up on like better ways of working. And I feel like, because of that, like this job has been really good for me as like feeling more confident as like a professional 3D artist, because now I feel like I'm starting to come up with like, processes for doing things that are much more, I guess, technically sound than I would have ever come up with on my own. So
yeah, I get it.
That's nice.
That makes sense. Yeah, my most recent stint with technology companies was pretty long project that I did with Magic Leap.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
They're one of our competitors.
I've been with Magic Leap. I've been working with them. I mean, I stopped obviously because you know what's going on. That grin. But it was pretty wild ride for like, because it made me rethink and reinvent the way I look at, concept art.
Yeah.
Because I mean, from the point of view of what I was doing, um, it was fresh, refreshing, but similar and familiar, if that makes sense, in terms of like the workflows and how
Yeah.
you produce work. I'm trying to walk around NDA.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much you could talk about, so
Exactly.
I don't know which questions I can ask, but I'm really curious.
But one of the things that I can agree with you is like when you work with a technology company compared to other businesses, like the expectations of what you're going to do and how you're going to achieve what's being asked of you are completely different than in the entertainment industry. I feel like entertainment industry, because of the history of how long it's been there and how the budgets are made, how you work with project budgets and timelines, how often those projects get canceled, changed, like how many different things drive them to what they are.
Mm-hmm.
And they are like front and center based on visuals. I mean, obviously story, obviously directing, obviously all those things, but without visuals you have no product. I mean,
right.
Which arguably for like technology, you can still have a product without any like visuals, right? Because visuals are sort of like more of a UX experience than anything. So it was way more refreshing, and like I did enjoy that business more than film industry in general, I would say.
Did you have to learn any like new like tools or workflows or anything like that as part of this?
Not necessarily, but there were opportunities that allowed me to think about what kind of tools I would use in order to produce something that's being required.
Gotcha.
Because sometimes you can show the same results in a different way, whether it's animated or not, whether it's still images, but then like whether it's painted or made in 3D, whether it's like handcrafted or more like generated,
Yep.
So there's a lot of those things that change the way you look. They change I guess the best way to put it is this: you're being in front of a problem that is given to you to be solved with the predisposition that you have time to solve it, that you're not sort of like in a panic mode that you have to solve it now, whatever means necessary. It doesn't matter if it's going to be good or not. It's better be good, but it doesn't matter because like at the end of the day, it just has to be solved. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like in a lot of times in film industry, and that just varies between like which directors you work with, which production designers and art directors you work with. The same idea. It's in the games, in video games, where depending on which studio you work in, you're gonna have a different pace of work, and not necessarily because there is more work required from you, and that happens obviously, but also because of the approach of how the problems are going to be solved. And oftentimes I've noticed when there's like a breakneck pace on imposed on the project, usually it means that there's no trust in the long-term process. And there is just so many layers that basically decide whether there is a trust or not into a product, Like I'll give you an example. Like if you work on a franchise, on like a big franchise, right? The likelihood of a project being lifted and greenlit from the ground is very high, because most likely with the money that's being pumped into a project, with the kind of stardom of whether director, actors and whatever is being available to you, and also public's familiarity with the product. Like familiarity matters so much. Like it's such an important aspect of public opinion. Like if they know what they're looking at, it's much easier to sell the idea or film or whatever to them than if it's like something completely new.
Which is why so many sequels and movie franchises are dominating everything right now. It seems like it's that familiarity,
movies are impossible
and
to make.
The safety that, like, if you make a movie in this franchise, like, people are probably going to go see it because
you're gonna break even.
That established fan base there.
In most cases, the studio will break even because they understand, okay, like this is probably going to sell enough for us to break even, so there's no risk. We can keep going. Obviously, if it makes a ton of money, then that's better, But when you have IP that no one understands and knows,
it's a risk.
It's a high risk unless it's attached to like a revered name in the industry,
Right.
Like one of those names could be James Cameron. Like, he made Avatar, like that became a huge success, but that was like any other director, that would be a giant gamble.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but yeah, with the technology, like it's interesting because the visuals we create towards technology specifically, it's more of a UX problem than the core of the technology itself, And I think that makes a giant difference in terms of like how the whole process is approached, because like you cannot speed up the process of solving UX issues.
That's right.
It's just going to be a disaster, right?
You have to be really thorough and thoughtful, I think, about every step along the way.
Yeah.
Which is kind of changes the way that you work to a certain extent. Not that you wouldn't be thoughtful about all the work that you do, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. And the client is also different in that terms, because like when you make entertainment, there's a certain baseline of what's being expected, I guess, well, the movie has to look good, like that's, if it doesn't look good, it better has like a really rock solid story, But if it doesn't have any of that, then no one's gonna watch it.
Right.
With technology, it's like, well, if you're making, like, let's say if you're making like use case scenarios and we're showing the product how it's gonna look at the end, especially internally, that has to be designed in a completely different way than if you are designing for the outside world, So yeah, there's something about it for sure. The difference between those two industries, I think, is pretty large. So
yeah, I feel like I got some exposure to that when I first started my job, because I was on kind of a team that was working more on the like basically when I was first hired, I was put on a team that was very multidisciplinary. And so I was kind of like the product visualization guy, but everyone else on the team were 3D artists that were working in different departments. So like there was someone who's like an environment artist, someone who's a character artist, someone who's kind of just a 3D generalist, and motion designer, UI, UX designer. And so it was really cool because everyone was kind of working on different things, but we all were sort of rooted in 3D as far as our skills were concerned.
Right.
And so I got to like see a lot of the work that was being done for like environments that we actually develop ourselves for VR. And so that's something where it's like you're designing something that has to look beautiful, but it's also a whole experience that people are going to be able to walk around and interact with in a very different way than just producing images that you might look at, right?
Right.
So it's like a design problem in the sense that, you have to think about like distance, and you have to think about like line of sight, and like what are people going to be focusing on when they look a certain way, and how many steps are you going to be able to take in this direction, and where are you going to get disoriented if you look over here, stuff like that, where you're solving all of these design problems in 3D, as well
Right.
as just trying to make something that feels nice and is beautiful to look at. And then even it goes to other things too, like with character design. We're designing sort of like avatars that sort of represent people in VR, and there's so many like technical sort of things that have to work just right in order for the experience to feel natural and to actually feel like you're interacting with another person, as well as like giving that person the ability to like express their own identity, right? So it's so much more than just like trying to create some really cool looking characters. It's got a lot of layers to it that you have to kind of figure out, and a lot of that stuff takes a long time to get right, and a lot of like iteration and process. And it's also like very multidisciplinary too, because you've got the people that are dealing with all of the technical sort of execution of all of this stuff that are very closely involved and working directly with the artists to try and like work through all the problems, which is super, super cool to see. And I feel like the work that I'm doing now is not really like that at all. It's just kind of like, marketing focused sort of imagery, which is very much like, has an effect on the perception of the brand, the perception of our products, which are all very important things that, we're trying to get right. So, and I can't talk about the details of that because
yeah, of course,
it's all very, very secret, but I'm excited about the stuff that we're doing right now. And I think it's going to be really cool when people can actually see it. So, yeah, but I wanted to change the subject and ask you about something.
Yeah, go ahead.
So one of the things that I've been doing in my free time is, it's like we were talking about 3D modeling earlier, or like 3D tools like Blender and or Fusion 360 and stuff like that. I feel like I have this like problem that I'm trying to get past mentally, which is like I have like the background of an industrial designer, which means when I approach 3D modeling something, like my instinct is to be very precise and like very
I see what you mean.
Yeah, like very detail oriented about everything. And so, a lot of these tools like Fusion 360, like SolidWorks, like you can use them in that way where you're being very prescriptive about like dimensioning everything very precisely and, making sure everything like fits together perfectly and all these different things. And I feel like I feel like I've been on a search for a long time for like a workflow that allows me to, like get beyond that sort of like, I just feel like I work very slowly, and I feel like I don't get to the I don't get to like the end like level of like complexity and like detail that I would like to have like quickly, because I'm bogged down in like trying to make everything just right and working within these CAD tools that are kind of designed to be, parametric and allow you to sort of be really prescriptive about all these things. And I'm hoping like there's some tutorials out there that I'm planning to do, like Paul, I'm going to butcher his French last name, Chatisson.
Chatisson, yeah, Chatisson.
Yeah. Yeah, he recently, he's been doing these amazing pieces of space, sort of concept art, designing all these vehicles and rendering them really beautifully. And he just released a tutorial on Gumroad for kind of his workflow with Moy and Octane. And I'm really looking forward to taking that, because I'm hoping that like watching the way that he approaches these things is going to help inform me like how I can kind of like alter the way that I'm thinking about it, because I just feel like I'm struggling to get beyond some sort of mental barrier that's going to allow me to like actually like realize a lot of the ideas that I have. And I think one thing that like, I guess one unique thing about the way that it's like I have like a kind of a similar project that I've been working on, which is like trying to design like 3D spacecraft, but instead of designing just like a spacecraft, I'm designing like modular pieces that can be like connected together and assembled in 3D, so that you could, ostensibly make any number of different spacecraft sort of combinations by, rearranging these parts into different configurations. And I feel like that's my like designer brain, like, wanting to, like, instead of designing just a cool ship, I'm like designing a system, because like if I can design a system, then it allows me to do cool things that I wouldn't be able to do if I just focused on like designing one vehicle. Obviously it takes a lot longer, but I think that's like one way that I've like tried to like get around my like the way that my brain works and allow me to like do more, I guess, just have more like the creative output that I want to have in 3D. If I feel stuck by like the idea of, designing one ship and like figuring out everything about it and like detailing the whole thing out, if I don't feel like I can do that, then I can just like break it into pieces and like design all the pieces and then put them together and have something that's really cool in the end. And I feel like this is just a thing about the way my brain works, because I have another project that I'm doing as well that's in Blender. It's kind of like an architecture project where instead of like, it's basically, again, like designing a system of parts. So it's like a system of like, walls and windows and, various kinds of details that can be assembled into buildings.
I can see where this is going.
Yeah, like this is just something that I like whenever my brain like tries to think about like, oh, what would be like the most fun like thing to design? It's like, well, why design one thing when you can design all of the things? And like,
but do you feel like you struggle with it personally? I mean, okay, you said something about, I feel like I'm working slow, right?
Yeah.
I have a, I'm learning to understand a little bit of how am I going to dress it in the right words? I'm learning to realize that speed is not everything, and the artwork that I see that is out there that I like the most, that people appreciate the most, that make the most splash and actually get you hired, like literally get you hired, is the one where you're meticulously design, put effort towards, put heart and soul, and not rush. And then you end up working on the project where expectations is like, you're going to do that, but in 10 times less time.
Right. That's the problem. But I guess like for me, it's just at this point, it's not something that I'm really doing with the intent of getting a job in particular. It's more just for the sake of the artwork itself.
Right.
And like,
but do you struggle with it? Like, do you struggle with the idea that you need to be faster, or is it more of like a question mark that you're just not sure?
Maybe. I mean, I think part of it is just that I have very little exposure to how other people work. And so I'm like assuming that everyone else is way more efficient than I am. And maybe that's not actually true. I don't know.
To some degree, that you will find a lot of artists. I think Jama is a great example of that. Jama is super fast. Like the way he designed, like take any of his classes from Learn Squared and everything,
Gumroad tutorials,
and any Gumroad stuff he's been releasing recently, especially the one that we released recently with the Star Wars. It's just excellent. And it seems like in half an hour he has a scene, and it's just like, holy crap, like he made it all. But you have to realize one thing. This is any of those tutorials you watch, and that's going to apply to most of it, not all of it, but most of it. Most of the tutorials you're going to watch, they're going to look like the way they are constructed. They tell you how it's done, and it looks fast. And mostly it's because like people like Jama or Paul, they figured out the workflow that made them to be efficient to create that specific thing. Now, if the director would come in and say, let's say the latest Jama tutorial, I really like the mountains and everything, right? The way it's designed and in your concept, like the way you replicated the original Star Wars artwork, I love it. But I want to design, like change the design completely. I want the rocks to be shattered and floating in sky, right? Normally that's what you would do in concept art. Like you would get notes and you continue.
Yep.
Well, now you have to design, like the workflow shows you how to do it with existing assets, because that's the fastest way to do it, right? So you would kit bash, you would use, you know, existing textures, existing shaders, megascans, you name it, right? But the moment you have to design something, you're gonna have to spend time designing it. Like there's just no other way around it. Now we have tools like, you know this because you work in the you work at Oculus. You have Medium, and Medium is super fast for like sketching in 3D.
Yeah, or Gravity Sketch, or
Gravity Sketch. Yeah, you name it. But that's not gonna be a film asset. To make a film asset or like a VFX asset, you gotta go to ZBrush, and you're gonna spend a lot of time to make sure that everything is done correctly. You know, if you're doing concept art and you're designing something that has maybe those kit bash elements, the moment the script changes or something changes, now you're in a predicament where you don't have a kit bash piece. Or if you have to design a spaceship, like you're not gonna kit bash existing spaceship and say you designed it. Like, come on, that's just not gonna happen.
Sure.
I mean, you could technically try, but you get exposed, you're gonna get in trouble. So don't do it. But you get the idea, right?
Yeah.
So I guess the question would be like, you know, are you collecting every design you've made so far as your like personal kit bash library? Because like if you're so meticulous that, let's say you have your spaceship that's designed in modular way, are those modules designed in modular way? Meaning like you would have like a library of insets that you can just replicate on your, you know, not only on your current design, but all the other designs. Like I'm thinking in a way that, you know, Vitaly would think with his kit bashing, right?
And I think that's like the next step, I think, for what I need to do, because I'm still at the point where like every new module I'm working on, it's like I have to start from scratch, and like I'm not really bringing in lots of like existing details, because I feel like that's part of my problem with the tools is that like Fusion, it's not as like free flowing and like, you know, easy to just like bring in a bunch of things and like smash them together as something like Moi or, you know, a lot of other 3D tools. So I'm trying to like figure out what feels the best and what like combination of tools allows me to get the results that I want. And I feel like I'm not quite there yet with
I don't think anyone
the current workflow. And I'm sure most people probably feel that way. So I'm probably not alone in that, but yeah,
if I would show you the bar that I have of software that I like half familiar with that I use on daily basis, you would be like, what the fuck is wrong with you, man?
No, I mean, I think I'm probably the same way. Like I'm constantly hopping between different programs to like get specific things done that I might know how to use like 5% of that program. But if I can go in there and do the one thing that I need to do, then, you know, it's useful to me. So
yeah, but those are tools, you know, tools are there to help you get the work done. It doesn't matter. Like I think the purism approach that some people have, like it has to be this and this only. That's just not the way to go. You know, I even had Jama this year on the podcast, and he had some hard words to say about Blender specifically. You know, which all of them are true, but it doesn't mean that he's not gonna use it. He just means that he's gonna use it for this, but for anything else, he's gonna use something else. You know,
sure,
and that's normal. I think a lot of people get caught up with like, oh, I need this one ultimate package to do everything, you know, like you're just not gonna do that. You know, it's funny because Ash sent me Cinema 4D, like a tutorial on how to make cloth in Cinema 4D, and he said like, I mean, what the fuck? Because you compare that to, you know, Marvelous Designer, which is like arguably the easiest cloth simulation tool ever made.
Sure.
And it's like, well, yeah, of course, you know, use that instead.
Right. Or, you know, if you need to do some really elaborate simulation, like use Houdini, because it can do that too. So, yeah.
But the sentiment itself, like, because hopping between softwares is usually, that's where the sort of like the break connection between the workflow exists. It's again, like a UX issue where it's like, if there was a bridge Imagine if it was like a hub bridge
Yeah, that's what I need.
for all software where you just press Go Z in all directions. That would be amazing. That
Yeah,
would
I
just
would
solve
love that.
all the issues. Like, who's gonna write it?
Some needs some help here.
Yeah, someone needs
if
to
anyone's
write it.
listening.
Get like Blender, 3ds Max, and like fucking Octane and Redshift, all of those programming in like one button, you know? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like to me, I'm like torn between like Blender is pretty awesome. Like I've started learning it. There is just a lot of things that I really enjoy and really like.
Same.
There's a lot of things I hate about it too, and a lot of limitations that just drive me nuts. On like a very large scale scenes, it's just unusable for me. I just fall back immediately to 3ds Max, which for rendering it's slower. UI is maybe slower. Maybe you don't have the shortcuts. Maybe you have to do some things manually, but you can open a scene with 40 million polygons and 2,000 objects, and it's just going to fly through it, you know? Sure, it's going to render longer, but if you would try to open that scene in Blender first, it's going to be a nightmare in terms of UI experience. But also, it's not going to render fast in Eevee. It's just going to run out of memory. It's just going to pre-compute and calculate, and then you bake it for like an hour. It's like the baking process itself becomes so long that it's just like you might as well just render.
You're not actually saving time anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah,
it's always like finding it's a struggle, because like I always look at 3ds Max as well, and it's like, look, you have a direct bridge to Unreal, and now everyone is talking about Unreal 5, and you have literally the data smith where you just press one button, it's a Go Z for Unreal with 3ds Max. It's the only software that has it, by the way. Everything else is like FBX bullshit, you know, which is like frustrating to deal with, because you have to transform all the materials and everything. With 3ds Max, you just beep, and then it fucking does everything automatically, you know.
It's worth a lot.
Yeah, it saves you a shit ton of time, and you have V-Ray in Unreal as well. I mean, I don't know how relevant it's going to be. I'm really curious about Unreal, what this demo shown, like how much of it is custom designed versus actually real-time calculated, because that's a giant difference. Like if you can set up a scene, if it's showing you, and again, I'm just oblivious. I might just need to rewatch it again. But I am almost, unless they're like magicians working at, and that might be true as well. Maybe there are real little Gandalfs working at the Epic Games, where they figured out the way to deal with trillions of polygons real time. I feel like it's all compute baking based, meaning you design your scene, you build it, and then you bake it, and then it becomes some kind of data anchor that is just more efficient than the amount of polygons you would see on the screen otherwise. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm really curious how that works, because they're basically showing us stuff that like previously shouldn't have been possible. And so
there's always a catch.
There's got to be. I mean, yeah.
Or maybe Nvidia made like a Skynet card that they're gonna release at the same time, and it's gonna be a requirement.
Right.
That just takes over the year.
Well, but like the stuff that they're showing us, like the whole point is to actually have that, be possible in video games that are going to run on consoles.
And I'm sure it will be.
So yeah, like there's got to be, they've got to have the hardware in mind the entire time that they're doing this stuff, I would imagine. So
yeah,
but it's super impressive. Like,
I'm pretty sure it's baked lighting, meaning like it's like with Eevee, you have to bake a radiance map, otherwise it just looks like shit.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm pretty sure it's, and again, unless there's like a Gandalf the White and Gandalf the Gray and all of the councils of wizards, conjuring the
all
fucking code.
Epic Games.
All the wizards conjuring the code.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy stuff. Yeah, it looks really impressive though.
Yeah, I mean, I think the future is definitely going to be in real time, one way or another. So I'm trying to. I mean, I'm not like putting a huge amount of effort into learning like Unreal right now, but I'm definitely keeping an eye on everything that's going on with that. I actually spent some time learning Unity, just because I had an idea for a game project that I wanted to try and prototype, and just decided, well, I think so. What happened was, this is actually the same project as the one that I was telling you about. That was like a modular architecture construction kit. I wanted to like have just like the easiest way to be able to build stuff using these parts that I had designed. And I didn't want it to be realistic. I wanted it to just be like cell shaded and very stylized. And so I was like, I'm just gonna, and this was before Blender 2.8 came out. So I didn't really have like I looked at all the 3D software that I had, and I was like, none of these tools really allow me to do what I want to do and like have this sort of interface work the way that I want it to work, for just like being able to really quickly like access this large library parts and just like pop them in and build stuff almost like Minecraft style. So I was like, well, if I don't have anything that can do that, I'm just going to make it just for fun to see, like, learn some programming and learn about Unity. So I did. I spent like probably 6 months just noodling around with Unity, learning how to program stuff in Unity and how to kind of design this sort of custom interface that would allow you to do this stuff, and almost like essentially designing a 3D program from scratch, where like you have to think about like, how do you move parts around? Like, how does the camera work? Like, how does the lighting in the scene work? Like all these different things that you kind of take for granted in any like 3D program that you're using, because they're there for you and they work. So like it made me like go look at Cinema 4D and like understand like all the nuances of like how the like object manipulation works, like how you move objects around, or like how you rotate the camera around and pan it and stuff like that. And there's so many small nuances that are happening in there that you don't even think about when you're using it, because it's all just intuitive. But to have to like go build all of those things from scratch gave me like a new appreciation for just like the sophistication of just the behavior of the tools that we have. So I spent like 6 months in Unity just like learning how to build this thing. And then Blender 2.8 came out, and I realized like, oh, like in Blender 2.8, I can do all the stuff that I wanted to do in Unity and just do it in Blender. And now I don't really have to do this anymore. So I kind of stopped doing that project in Unity, but it was really valuable still, because it gave me a huge appreciation for just like, game programming. And I had to like learn, how to write code for real-time stuff in general, which is not something I had done before. And that was cool. So I feel like I do this a lot, where like I'll do a project just to like learn a new thing and then don't necessarily apply that knowledge afterwards. It's just like something that I keep in my back pocket in case for some reason to know that in the future. But I just enjoy like exploring a lot of different tools and different ways of doing things. And I end up with a lot of unfinished projects as a result, but I'm kind of okay with that to a certain extent, just because it's fun. So
yeah, tools, there's always new tool coming out. The next new fad's going to be Unreal, and then V-Ray is gonna make the Lavina, whatever it's called, and then Octane's gonna come out with something, and then Blender is gonna come out with something, and then Maya is gonna come out with something, and then 3ds Max.
The tools are always changing.
Yeah,
so
it's kind of funny. Like you have to like, sometimes I feel like we get caught up with the idea that, oh, this new tool that's coming out that could be a grand savior of it all. And sometimes it is, like as with your example, like when Blender 2.8 came out, like, oh, holy crap, that solves this giant issue that I had. But then you have, other instances where you're expecting that, oh man, like, and again, I'm gonna go back to Blender and say like, oh man, like Eevee, Eevee, and oh my god, like real-time rendering. And then like, all right, you have Unreal now, and it's sort of like very competitive. So yeah, it's always something. I feel like being more of a generalist, having like a more of a generalist approach to, and always learning, like always figuring out if that's the tool that I want to learn, if that's the tool that I want to have in my toolbox and be able to create, And I think it comes back to our original discussion too. Is like you have to find time to do this, and if you work yourself to death, that's like you're just gonna almost always be on the behest of client work, and slowly wither away with your knowledge. It's like a trade-off. Like I can make more money now versus maybe make less money, but invest in more stability in the future by learning new things.
Stay on top of new tools and just be constantly experimenting. Yeah.
Do you find yourself learning new tools when just for sake of like, I want to try this new feature that I saw, or is it more like driven by, hey, I'm starting this new project, and it seems like learning this new tool would be really helpful to make it happen?
Yeah, I think I don't think I do that as much as I do just try things for the sake of trying them, to be honest. Because I think like I'm like very comfortable using like a certain set of tools like Cinema 4D and Redshift and Fusion 360 and SolidWorks. Like those are my like core, and I guess Houdini too. I do a lot of Houdini stuff in Blender. But like outside of those tools, I don't really, I don't know. I think a lot of it comes down to just curiosity about the way that other people do things, and like wanting to try things just to see like, oh, maybe if I try this one tool, I'll discover something that will help me just improve my like workflow overall, or like allow me to do something new. But I feel like with my personal projects, they're usually more like design oriented, and the tools that I need to accomplish the idea that I have in mind don't change that often, I guess.
Got it.
But I worry that like if I don't, if I'm not constantly curious and like trying to learn new things and try new tools, I worry that I'm going to miss out on something important that, will help me a lot if I learn it. So I think for that reason, I'm just curious about the way other people do things. And when I see, other people's work that I really love, I'm always curious, like, are they doing something different that I could learn from? Maybe there's just either it could just even be the way that they think about the work that they do, or like the process that they go through with the same tools, because I think within the tools that we have, they're so adaptable. And so there's so many different ways you can approach them. Different people might have completely different ways of using the same tools. And so, I think that's what motivates my like desire to learn new things the most, is just like getting more out of the tools that I already have, and then experimenting with things that other people are using just to see.
Right. You have the tools FOMO.
Yeah, I mean, I do, which is kind of why I wanted to like, spend some time with Unity just to see like what that was all about.
Yeah.
And, now Unreal is, I've tried Unreal as well, but just briefly. I didn't do anything major in there. And then like my like long-term obsession with learning is Houdini, just because it's like the ultimate 3D tool to a certain extent, but it is so deep that you could spend your entire career like learning how to use it.
Yeah, it's pretty
like learning how to do different things in it. But I enjoy like finding ways to marry Houdini with like other projects that I'm doing. So like one example of something that I'm working on recently is I have a industrial design side project that I'm doing with the clients where we're developing 3D printed shoe soles. And, typically in industrial design, like you would use, like there's a tool called Grasshopper, which is kind of like a parametric.
It's with Rhino, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's kind of like the quote unquote like normal way to do sort of parametric things in CAD. But in this case, like our midsoles are 3D printed, and so you can really use any tool to generate them that you want, as long as the end result is a mesh that's airtight and can be printed. So I'm decided to try to use Houdini, as an industrial design tool to create these 3D printed shoe soles, and had to develop like a whole process to do it that I came up with myself. But at the end of the day, like it was totally worth it. And, now I have this like custom tool that I can use to really quickly make these incredibly elaborate sort of lattice structures and things, which, and to me, that's just a fun project because it allows me to take this tool that I already know and figure out a new thing that I can do with it that is sort of unconventional and not something that I've seen other people do before. So that's fun. And then within that same project, like I also used Houdini to develop like a parametric knitting tool. So like we needed to be able to visualize different types of like knit fabrics and like textiles with like very specific patterns, so that like A, so that we could just render them and have it look nice, but also B, so that we could send images to the manufacturer and be like, hey, this is what we want. And so I needed something that was like very accurate because, we needed to be able to send it and sort of specify like, this is the type of knit pattern that we're looking for. So I've been working with a knitting expert who is like the former head of R&D at one of these knitting companies in China. And he basically gave me access to like this massive library of all of the knit patterns that this company can produce.
That's awesome.
So I developed the thing in Houdini where I can like draw like the pattern, basically like input, these stitches are going to be recessed. These are going to be raised. This one's going to have like this pixel is going to have a hole in it. This one's going to be solid. Like you can, and like, also patterning different colors. So you can have multiple colors. And like, I'm basically just drawing these things as pixels, like on a grid. And then the system takes that information and generates like a 3D representation of the stitches. And then you can either export the 3D if you want to, or you can just bake that to like displacement maps and normal maps and so on and so forth.
That's pretty awesome.
I was able to like make this tool that allows me to take this like database of stuff from the manufacturer, draw the knit patterns in Houdini, and then produce maps that you can use for rendering.
Just for clarity, when you say tools, I think we should clarify for those who are not aware. It's basically like you're wrangling nodes in Houdini together that create specific desirable results. Because Houdini is basically nodes all the way.
Right.
It's like Blender's shader tree. And there's this add-on that is in it, like it's called Node Wrangler. It's like by default where we can basically make a selection of the nodes you like, and then make like okay, this is a group now. So that would be like a sort of like a layman's man interpretation of what the tool is.
Yeah, I can explain a little bit more. So like, Houdini is it's kind of like a blank slate of a program, basically, where you are presented with just a massive library of functions. And when you're building something in Houdini, like you're not designing an object, you're designing like a process.
Yeah.
And so when I say tool, what I mean is
going crazy.
What I mean is like I'm building like a process that was sort of custom sort of thought out in Houdini to take in certain information and then produce some kind of a specific result that I want. So it could be the shoe sole, which in this case, like I'm inputting like, some like basic forms that then get turned into lattices. Or in the case of the knitting tool, I'm inputting just some like essentially pixels, just like patterns of like squares, and then outputting, realistic knit texture maps. So I love like the creative process of like going into Houdini, like having some idea of what you want to get out of it, and then figuring out like how do I get from nothing to a tool that does that for me. I love the thought process there and like the sort of creative problem solving of figuring that out.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I did use Houdini for my project as well. Dude, my daughter is just like, for the first time, just being super vocal about it. But the process, it's a similar process that I used for making my film. Basically just coming up.
You built all these custom shaders, right? For
the shaders I built for my film were done in V-Ray. In 3ds Max, so it's a similar logic to what you're saying. So basically using the series of existing parameters and nodes and just wrangling them together so that they create a specific result. Yep. But I did try a similar approach and logic towards making like special effects, some of the special effects for the film as well. Just being able to have Houdini generated smoke and fire, like all those like little things. Not all of them, but some of them. And just like learning it from a perspective of someone who has no idea what programming is, because like if you know a little bit about programming, it makes Houdini workflow so much easier.
For sure.
But even then, like, I mean, I've been praising Houdini for being pretty awesome software, and it's like, I guess the good explanation also would be like, imagine if you're doing poly modeling, you're doing like cutting and extrusions and whatnot. Imagine if each of those operations were like a layer, or like a little node that you can connect via network, right? So if you do a cut and an extrusion, right, that's a little node, then you can basically use the same node and wrangle it to somewhere else, and it's going to create exact same operation on something different. So it allows you to make those modular sort of like, you know, maps that you connect together to get different like generative results, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's the thing I love about it, how, you know, when you're done with that process, you can make, you know, an infinite number of potential variations on whatever it is that you design that tool to do.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. So it's, I don't know. I think I'm detecting that this is a theme in all of my work, which is like wanting to design systems instead of designing like one thing.
It's what you like though, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and
wouldn't that be the best way to approach your work? Like just doing what you love?
Yeah, and you know, I think I am, but I also have all of these like doubts about like, oh, you know, maybe I'm not doing things the right way, or maybe there's a better way, or you know.
But is there
whatever.
a right way? That's
but
the
I
question,
think,
right?
Yeah,
is there a
exactly.
right way? I don't think. I don't. I mean, there are obviously like more of an industry standard, quite a like existing workflows that everyone can learn, but it's not like set in stone, and people are showing left and right that you can go about specific topics in a different way. And sometimes it might be less productive, meaning like, okay, this other way I'm doing things is maybe more proficient for the project, but what if we need to make changes and the changes are more dramatic, then you're starting over, versus like if you're doing a more modular approach, for instance, okay, it's going to take a little longer, but then like any changes can be done almost on the fly because of it. It's a similar approach to like painting and doing things in 3D. Although 3D is catching up so fast that it doesn't matter anymore, you know? But sometimes painting is faster. Like most of the time, painting and sketching is faster than setting up 3D scenes. But once you paint it, it's painted. Like you cannot change the camera and lighting all of a sudden, you know? Versus like in 3D, it's going to take you a little longer to set it up. But then you can change everything on the fly. So yeah, it's a trade-off.
For sure. But I think my brain definitely exists in 3D and wants to work in 3D. So I'm happy about it, even if it takes a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So
where do you think it's going for you in terms of like personal projects and career? Like, do you have like specific sets of goals that you're heading towards, or are you more like flowing through the time and figuring things out as they go, and you know, kind of adjusting and
yeah, I think I'm doing a lot of flowing now. I think when I was working for Minimal, I had like very specific goals in terms of things that I wanted to get better at and things that I wanted to learn. And I think once I sort of developed some of those skills, like learning cinema, learning Redshift, you know, getting a little bit more competent at motion design, now I feel like I'm just kind of going with the flow a lot more and spending time. I think one thing that I noticed about the way that I approach things is the most efficient thing for me to do is always whatever the most fun thing is in the moment.
Right.
Like if I'm having a good time working on something, then I'm going to get a lot more done than if I'm trying to force myself to do something that I'm not as excited about. So
yeah, that makes sense.
The nature of like the work that I do at Oculus is pretty cyclical. So like throughout the year, like certain times will be really slow and then other times will be incredibly busy. And so the amount of free time that I have to work on personal work kind of fluctuates a lot throughout the year. Right now I'm in one of like the high points where I have like no free time basically. But that's because we're gearing up for just another product that we're working on. So, you know, right now I can't really spend that much time, as much time as I would like, on personal
Right.
work. But then in the periods of the year where, I don't have as much to do and the work-life balance is a lot better, I love to just kind of dabble in whatever it is that I am having the most fun with at the time, which I think I said before, I end up with like a lot of projects that are unfinished, and because I'll lose interest in something and want to move on to another idea, or learning another tool or something like that, experimenting with something else. And sometimes I come back to those projects and finish them. Sometimes I don't. But I think that I've kind of just realized that about my brain, that like I just need to work on the thing that's the most engaging and fun, and I'll get the most out of that if that's what I'm doing. And I think that like now that I'm kind of like comfortable in my current job, and enjoying it for the most part, that leaves my free time kind of open-ended, where, I can just work on kind of whatever strikes my fancy, basically, and make art for the sake of making art, rather than trying to like advance towards a certain job or a certain opportunity or something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, and I think, that's the way that I enjoy things the most, is when the only goal is just like creativity for its own sake. And so I'm like working all the time, like no matter what, because that's just how I am. But a lot
Wait
of it
till
is
we
just
get
working.
family.
Oh my gosh.
Wait till we get a little one, like this little monster, like everyone can hear probably.
That's down the road, but yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
I'm sure your priorities shift, of course, but
Switches things upside down a little bit for sure. Yeah. I'm still kind of overworking myself. I guess that's just by default. I'm that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true for both of us probably, but I overwork myself by choice, because I want to, and because I think it's fun, and I'm just doing stuff that I enjoy doing. So for me, that's all that really matters.
That does make sense. Dude, we've spent almost 2 hours talking.
Yeah.
Time's flying.
Awesome.
It's kind of crazy. We could probably go for another, like I have some questions and topics that I would definitely want to go over, but that little creature is, I guess she's asking for attention. So
I can hear her saying daddy.
So yeah, I think it's a good moment to wrap it up. Like we've covered a lot of grounds, and it was fun to catch up. Obviously, I mean, we talk every now and then, but not like in a long extended form. And I cannot believe I didn't have you on the podcast just yet. It's kind of crazy because yeah, you're like your class and your work is just like, it's a shred city.
Oh, thank you so much, man. I feel the same about yours.
Appreciate it too. So okay, so where can people find your work?
So my website is zarki.net, zarki.net. I'm on Instagram at _Zarki_. Those are the places where I post the most stuff. So
sounds good.
And of course, like my class is on Learn Squared if you're interested in learning about industrial design. It's a great class for beginners and people that are new to the industry, or new to the workflows and tools and so forth. So definitely check that out.
Yeah, it's basically your Cincinnati school in one class.
Well, minus the in-person parts, which are
minus the in-person
most important.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I did what I could.
But it's like nicely distilled, pretty good. It's like a foundation. It's pretty awesome.
And actually, I have a video series on Vimeo as well that I created based on a talk that I gave at a conference last year. It's like a multi-part series that just talks about kind of like all aspects of sort of design and 3D visualization, kind of breaking them down like one topic at a time. It's not really a tutorial. It's just kind of like me talking about stuff. But
sure.
I've had a lot of people tell me that was really useful as well. So that's
what's the Vimeo link? Would it be _Zarki_
yeah,
as well?
If you just Google like Tim Zarki Vimeo, you'll find it.
Okay. Perfect. Awesome. So, dude, good times.
It was great to chat with you. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you finding time in your busy schedule.
Same to you.
No, it's good. It's good. We actually found like good windows to get it done and have it in a bag. It's pretty awesome. Yeah, definitely. Let's talk later and schedule like another call another one, because it's gonna be fun. There's a lot of like industrial design and future of technology, all of those things that we're both sort of like quote unquote privy,
Right.
and we can talk about without going too much into NDA of the things that we are working on, like meandering around it far enough from it to not get in trouble.
For sure.
But like contemplate. I think that's always a very interesting discussion, because like when you look at VR, AR, I think there's a XR, which is like mixed reality, so like a lot of those things, then generative design and work, and then how AI is affecting it all, and then like there's just so much going on behind the closed doors, and it's like slowly trickling into our industry, but it's like it's not in the full swing, and once it gets there,
once it arrives,
it's just gonna be crazy,
turn things over quite a bit. So
yeah. All right, man.
Yeah, man.
Good times.
Well, good luck. Yeah, good luck on your short film also.
It's done.
Really excited for that.
By the time we're talking, it's done. So
awesome.
It's a matter of I do have a release date, August 1st, so it's gonna drop then. Showtimeanime.com. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well,
it's pretty awesome. Yeah. Big stuff, but yeah. Cannot wait. All right, dude. Wrap it up here.
Take care, man.
Thanks everyone who was listening, and I will see you guys in the next one. Cheers.
Cheers.
Awesome. That's it. We're done.
Sweet, man.